Welcome back to Politically Correct. My name is Jordan Marr. It is good to see you guys again. In this episode, we're going to be talking about our newest Supreme Court Justice, Neil Gorsuch, and how he finally came to be appointed in the messy and contentious political atmosphere that is our government today. I do have to say, it is really nice to finally have something to talk about again. The nature and purpose of this show more or less demands that the best content can only be produced after a specific event or issue has come to its conclusion. It's only after conclusion that we can really get a firm grasp on the full breadth of the situation and every relevant perspective involved. This makes it really difficult to talk about ongoing political happenings. I could talk about Syria today, for example, but that battle is just getting started. Or I could talk about the Republicans' failed Obamacare upheaval, but they're certain to try again soon. And I could talk about the congressional investigations into claims of wiretapping by Obama and Trump's associations with Russia, but those investigations are just getting underway as well. Today, though, we do have a conclusive event. Neil Gorsuch has been appointed to the Supreme Court, so without further ado, let's talk about our newest Supreme Court Justice, Neil Gorsuch. Neil Gorsuch is a 49-year-old Colorado native who served as a judge on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the 10th Circuit prior to his confirmation as the 113th Justice of the Supreme Court. Let's run through his background. Gorsuch graduated Columbia undergrad in 1988 and earned his J.D. at Harvard Law in 1991, where he, fun fact, actually went to school with former President Barack Obama. Following graduation, Gorsuch clerked for Judge David B. Sentell of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the 9th District, the D.C. Circuit, which is often considered to be the second most important court in the land, and then proceeded to clerk under Supreme Court Justices Anthony M. Kennedy, still currently serving today, and retired Justice Byron R. White. Gorsuch began practicing law with a prestigious D.C. law firm in 1995, earned a doctorate in legal philosophy from Oxford University in England in 2004, and joined the Department of Justice in 2005 as Principal Deputy to the Associate Attorney General. Gorsuch was nominated unanimously by the Senate to the U.S. Court of Appeals in 2006, which is a good segue into the varying perspectives surrounding him. On the legal side, Gorsuch is widely respected and well-liked. This is Melissa Hart, Director of the Center for the Study of Constitutional Law at Colorado University, and a liberal.
I do think he's a relatively good choice. Any nominee put forward by this president is going to have views that concern liberal groups, and therefore that relatively is important. He's a conservative judge, certainly, but he's a conservative judge and a very decent man.
Democratic and Republican appointees on the court love him. They say he's a good listener, easy to work with, and not someone who skews the facts to serve his purposes. Lawyer Neil Katyal, chief advocate to the Supreme Court and acting Solicitor General for part of the Obama administration, recently took a lot of heat for writing an op-ed in the New York Times titled, "Why Liberals Should Back Neil Gorsuch," in which he is quoted as saying, "If the Senate is to confirm anyone, Judge Gorsuch, who sits on the United States Court of Appeals for the 10th Circuit Court in Denver, should be at the top of the list. I have seen him up close and in action. He brings a sense of fairness and decency to the job and a temperament that suits the nation's high court." Katyal goes on to emphasize that his years on the bench reveal a commitment to judicial independence, a record that should give the American people confidence that he will not compromise principle to favor the president who appointed him. In particular, he has written opinions vigorously defending the paramount duty of the courts to say what the law is, without deferring to the executive branch's interpretations of federal statutes. At the end of the day, Katyal writes that he's advocating for Judge Gorsuch because he is confident that Gorsuch will fulfill the Supreme Court oath to administer justice without respect to persons and do equal right to the poor and to the rich, and that this dependability could restore American faith in the Supreme Court in a particularly tumultuous political time, and after two very contentious Supreme Court nominations processes that have made the Supreme Court out to seem just as political as any other branch of government. This all sounds well and good, so why were Democrats so adamant in their opposition to Gorsuch? After all, a Huffington Post and YouGov poll from late March indicates that Americans supported Gorsuch's confirmation by a 17-point margin, 40 to 23%. Democratic opposition to Gorsuch's appointment generally centers not on Gorsuch's qualifications, but on two things: his judicial record and the climate of the country. One of Democrats' biggest concerns, as the AP reported, is with Gorsuch's record on workers' rights cases, on many of which he ruled against vulnerable workers in impossibly difficult situations. One such case, which caught quite a bit of traction during Gorsuch's Senate confirmation hearings, involved Trans Am trucking driver Alphonse Madden. Madden was fired from his job for abandoning his trailer after his brakes froze on a cold winter night. His boss ordered him to remain with the cargo, but after waiting 3 hours in the unheated truck in the cold, Madden unhitched the trailer and drove off in fear for his health. Gorsuch voted against Madden in the case on technicality, citing the specific language of the Surface Transportation Assistance Act, which only bars companies from firing drivers who refused to operate an unsafe truck, because he did in fact operate the truck by driving off. The Trans Am case serves as a good example of Gorsuch's propensity to delve into the details of the text and scrutinize the precise language of legislation, a textualist approach to the law that is not for lack of supporters. As former Justice Scalia once wrote, "We elect our lawmakers who, representing us, approve only of the specific body of text found in the legal statute before them. The intent of the law was not democratically approved, thus, it has no bearing on the law." The case also serves, however, as a good example of the real-life consequences of Gorsuch's textualist approach, which can leave workers like Madden out of luck because of linguistic technicalities. His opinions in Huang versus Kansas State University and Hobby Lobby versus Sibelius have also raised further concerns with liberals over Gorsuch's apparent tendency to side with corporations and employers over individual people. Democrat opposition to Gorsuch is also partisan, of course. They raise concerns about salient political issues, including overturning Citizens United, which seems now an incredibly unlikely goal for the court because of Gorsuch's apparent pro-corporation tendencies, as well as discrimination and trans rights issues. Political commentator and co-host of the Al Sharpton Show on Radio 1, Earl Ofari Hutchinson, writes that Gorsuch's record on cases involving discrimination in the workforce, in education, etc., indicates a propensity to place the full burden of proof on the plaintiff, a standard that could be very difficult to bear. Democrats also take issue with Gorsuch's general political leaning. Writing in The Washington Post, Michigan State and Wisconsin-Madison political science professors Ryan Black and Ryan Owens conducted an ideal point estimate of Gorsuch's likely stance on the court by comparing Gorsuch and Supreme Court justices' opinions on cases the Supreme Court reviewed that emerged from the 10th Circuit Court on which Gorsuch sat. They found that contrary to other reports which focus on the ideological preferences of the home state senators involved in Gorsuch's confirmation process, Gorsuch is likely to be the most conservative justice on the court, more conservative even than former Justice Antonin Scalia, and certainly more conservative than Justice Thomas is currently. Republicans have rebutted by arguing that these complaints have no bearing on Gorsuch's viability because they have nothing to do with his qualifications. Republican Senator Mike Lee is quoted as saying that all they can come up with are facts that have absolutely nothing to do with his qualifications as a jurist. But Democrats argue that that's just the point. Senator Patrick Leahy, a Democrat from Vermont, said during a Judiciary Committee hearing,
Judge Gorsuch has spent more than a decade on the federal bench. He graduated from Harvard Law School. He clerked for the Supreme Court. He served in the Department of Justice. He received a unanimous, well-qualified rating from the American Bar Association. All things very positive for a Supreme Court nominee. And if all those things I've read were sufficient reason to confirm a nominee to the Supreme Court, well, of course, Chief Judge Merrick Garland, who had exactly the same qualifications, but was refused by the Republicans, would be sitting on the court today.
And that there is the kicker. Democrats argue that Republican refusal to give Judge Merrick Garland even a hearing last year proves that qualifications are not the only consideration in appointing a justice. Vox's Ezra Klein argued that in today's political climate, now is the time to put up a compromise candidate, someone a majority of Americans can get behind.
It's a mistake to see Supreme Court nominations as about individual resumes rather than the country's wishes. If the question is whether Gorsuch is qualified, then yeah, he's qualified. He is very qualified. That is not the question. The question is whether Gorsuch should be on the court, whether he is the right pick for this moment and for the decades in which he's likely to serve. And he is not. Republicans lost the popular vote in the presidential election preceding Scalia's death. They lost the popular vote in the election after Scalia's death. The will of the people might not be all that matters in politics, but nor should it be completely and utterly meaningless.
So there you have it. Judge Neil Gorsuch is a qualified, experienced, respected judge with a great deal of support on both sides of the aisle among lawyers and judges and among the American public. But he's also a controversial candidate. He's projected to be the farthest right justice on the court, perhaps even more so than Scalia was. His dedication to meticulous scrutiny of legal language and commitment to ardent textualism, even at the expense of individual lives, raises concerns about his judgment, as Senator Al Franken said during the Senate confirmation hearings. On April 7, 2017, the United States Senate confirmed Neil Gorsuch as the 113th Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States of America. With likely decades left on the bench, the impact and legacy of this appointment cannot be known for years to come. In the coming weeks and months, all eyes will be turned on Gorsuch and the court as he sets the tone for what is likely to be a very long career on the court. Thank you so much for watching. My name is Jordan Marr. This has been Politically Correct. In the next video, we'll take a deep dive into the unique and unprecedented Senate proceedings that conspired in order to confirm Justice Gorsuch to the court. We'll examine the history of the Senate, the filibuster, the nuclear option, and what this all means for the future of the Senate and our government. In the meantime, hit that subscribe button below if you think I earned it for slightly delayed, but hopefully conclusive, inclusive, and informative videos on the major political events of our time. I'll see you in the next one.